No coughing, Kilo. I'm just finally getting over this cough.
Oh, man.
This last seemed like it was going to last forever.
I kicked it and came back 3 times.
I relapsed too.
Yeah.
I had a relapse. This is terrible. I think they got super bugs now.
Mm-hmm. They do. Mm-hmm. They do. Well, this thing is going on and on.
Everybody's that I've talked to,
yeah.
And stomach.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, quit shuffling. Good evening and welcome to Freedom is a Constant Struggle with your host Kilu Nyasha, and board hopping is Sydney Matterson. I have some bad news to share with you. On the morning of March 30th, political prisoner Mumia Abu Jamal fainted in prison and was taken to the ICU of a nearby clinic. His blood sugar count was dangerously high at 779. He was in a diabetic shock. For perspective, diabetic coma is 800. He was slowly recovering in ICU, his blood sugar reduced to 333. That Mumia had diabetes was a complete shock to everyone. For the last 3 months, he had been under medical care in the prison and diagnosed with eczema. And since he had 3 blood tests since February, diabetes should have been diagnosed and treated accordingly. It never was. Instead, he has been subjected to hell by the prison medical system. In January, Mumia was shaken out of a deep sleep by guards for the infraction of not being awake during count. He was punished for 2 weeks, no calls or yard. Deep trance-like sleep and lethargy were the first signs of the problem. In addition to the physical depletion produced by untreated diabetes, he was also dealing with a severe outbreak of eczema. The meds he was given for his skin produced an extreme adverse reaction. His skin swelled and ruptured, and he was put in the prison infirmary for 2 weeks. This points to negligence of the worst kind, if not an outright attempt on Mumia's life. Family and friends are demanding review of his case by outside doctors and calling for Mumia's immediate release. Mumia's supporters and lawyers were in court challenging the Re-Victimization Review Act, also known as the Mumia Silencing Act, in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, when they received word that he had been taken to the hospital. The Abolitionist Law Center attorney Brett Roth is in Pottsville and taking all necessary steps to gain access to his client for the family and access to his medical records so that independent doctors can intervene. The hospital is in Pottsville. At 7 p.m. last night, Mumia was transferred back to the same prison infirmary that failed to identify his diabetes, gravely misdiagnosed him, and gave him severely detrimental treatment. This is an outrage. A press conference will be held tomorrow, April 3rd at 11 a.m. at the State Correction Institute in Frackville, Pennsylvania. They will then caravan to the office of the Department of Corrections in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. If you care about Mumia and the right to medical dignity, join our campaign to secure Mumia's ability to get treatment. Build Mumia's medical fund at bit.ly/rise4mumia. That's RISE, the number 4, MUMIA. bit.ly/rise4mumia. Tune in also to KPOO 89.5 FM to Saturday morning. Donald Lacey is recorded an interview with his brother, and that will be broadcast on Saturday morning. You can also stream it at www.kpoo.com. So, and now I'll take great pleasure in introducing 2 dear friends and activists, Ayana Labossiere of Haiti Action Committee and Robert Roth, also of the Haiti Action Committee. Ayana, being the daughter of Haiti Action Committee co-founder Pierre Labossiere, grew up in the active struggle to liberate Haiti. Excuse me. A graduate of Columbia University, she currently teaches at Mission High School, and she's fluent in French and Creole. Ayana has made numerous trips to Haiti and was recently in Haiti again, and she's also a new mommy with a beautiful daughter, Kai. who's my goddaughter.
That's right. Thank you.
And Robert Roth has been a social studies U.S. history teacher in San Francisco public schools for the past 27 years. He currently teaches at Mission High School, where he is also the social studies department chair. He is a lifelong activist working in international solidarity movements and in support of freeing all political prisoners. He was a member of the Committee to Free the SF-8. He is also a co-founder of Haiti Action Committee and a board member of the Haiti Emergency Relief Fund. He has been to Haiti 5 times, most recently for the return of President Aristide in March of 2011. Welcome, Ayana and Robert. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Kilu.
Yes. So, Ayana, why don't you kick it off with giving our viewers a brief history lesson about Haiti, which is an part of the island of, what do they call it, Hispaniola, that has Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And it's only 700 miles off the shores of Florida. So
Yeah, absolutely.
tell us about it.
And we were just talking about that word brief, so I'll try to make it substantive and also fitting that criteria.
Right on.
So whenever I think of Haiti's history, I like to think of it thematically, because looking at Haiti's history is really the history of oppression and injustice, but also revolution and rebelling against that oppression and that injustice. And for, since its inception, Haiti was founded, as we know it today, Haiti with formerly enslaved Africans was founded with the notion of being a colony of exploitation. And that if we look through Haiti's history, that's a current that runs through to this day. So at every opportunity, there's been an oppressive force trying to turn Haiti into something to exploit, and then a population that has resisted and rebelled. And we saw that, when Columbus touched down there with the Arawak and Taino people who initially started the combat and the battle. We saw that when Haiti became a French colony and enslaved and imported African people and enslaved them in the western third of the island, which is known today as Haiti. And at that time, Haiti was the most profitable colony on the planet. It was generating more coffee, sugar, so many raw materials and resources, more than any other colony in the world. And I think even more than the 13 U.S. colonies combined at that time. So it was a huge force. And so, which is also important to note for later, because a lot of people always wonder, well, why Haiti? Why are people so interested in Haiti? This is part of that reason. It's rich in natural resources and rich in so many other things. Continuing on to Haiti's history of dictatorship, right? And where we have, and I'm sorry, I have to mention too, Haiti's indemnity, the indemnity that was imposed on Haiti in 1825 after the Haitian people overthrew the French system of slavery, which was a huge, massive feat, 1804 becoming the first Black independent nation to free itself. And so, for people who don't know and people who ask why Haiti, again, this is a major and important victory and important for us to know.
And they not only kicked out the French, but they kicked out the British as well.
Absolutely.
And the Spanish.
And the Spanish of the whole island.
Exactly.
And got rid of slavery in the whole island and throughout Latin America. And also, we're fighting in various anti-slavery and abolition movements throughout the world, and sending arms and money as well. Fast forwarding 1825, these forces were, tried to claim that they needed reparations from Haiti, that Haiti made them lose their profits and their slaves, their property. And so therefore they posted naval ships outside of Haiti's ports and forced them to agree to an arrangement where they had to repay today's money, $21 to $22 billion in today's money, in order to be left alone, in order for Haiti to be left alone. Fast forwarding, we see this with the time of the most infamous dictatorship, right? Or I'm sorry, I would be remiss if I forgot to mention 1915 through 1934, where the U.S. Marines touched down in Haiti and the United States occupied Haiti, militaristically, politically, economically.
19 years?
Yeah, 19 years. And totally changed the entire structure. So Haiti, because of its history with slavery, had not allowed foreigners to come in and own land and make and determine Haiti's affairs and destiny. But of course, we know the U.S. came in, changed the Constitution around, misappropriated funds, took over the Treasury, and guided things in the direction they wanted to go, reinstated slavery in the form of sweatshops, and created a history of militarism that exists today, a model that exists today. And we saw, in 1957 with Haiti's most infamous dictator family, the Duvalier family. And I bring them up also because they have...
Also known as Papa Doc and Baby Doc.
Papa Doc and Baby Doc, absolutely. And, and some people may know, I think there's a rap artist who called himself Papa Doc. So if people know that name, that's where it came from, like brutal dictatorship. I don't know why he decided to call himself that, but in any case...
Ignorance of history.
Right.
No doubt.
Probably trying to sound intimidating, but in any event. So, and just the legacy that time and that regime left on Haiti was one where, the population is totally bankrupted, where funds and where, they're racking up loans and using them for their personal benefit and gain, using militarization to really oppress the people in the most dangerous ways, a lesson that had been learned from the U.S. Marines and that period of militarism, and a lesson that continues today. And we see that today what's going, the 1990s and in 1986 when Jean-Claude Duvalier was finally evicted from power and overthrown by the People's Movement, right?
They just ran him out of there.
Exactly.
The U.S. had to airlift him out.
Exactly. And he wound up in France.
Mm-hmm.
France kept him nice and comfortable for 25 years, I believe, thereabouts. Until he strolled into Haiti in 2011 on a busted passport. I don't know how he did that. Supposedly the U.S. and France don't know either, but he strolled into Haiti. But what was so significant about the People's Movement overthrowing this was that we saw this period of where people's voices were being taken into consideration. No longer were, once we elected President Jean-Bertrand Aristide, and
that was in
1990.
90.
Yeah, and
with about 67% of the vote.
Exactly, 67% of the popular vote, unheard of here.
And then in 2000, with 90% of the
with
vote.
90%, exactly, reelected.
Really
with that.
unheard of.
And never allowed to serve his full terms because of what he was standing for and what he was representing to the people. The policies that he was advocating, and the reversal of all of this oppression and injustice, and trying to balance the wealth and balance the scales and make sure that poor people, that people had dignity and a voice. And he had a lot of economic policies that were anti-corporation, anti-foreign corporate power, and that's a death toll or a death blow
he was
for a political leader.
And that's a
absolutely,
no-no
absolutely
under capitalist.
Yeah, he would open his home. He would open his home to anybody. Anybody was free to come in to the National Palace, and kids were allowed to swim in the swimming pool. Kids off the street. Homeless people were welcome to come in and sit down and have conversations with the president. And this was unheard of.
He was a people's leader.
Leader.
That's not tolerated.
Absolutely. And so, the U.S., France, Canada, other powers, and also forces within Haiti, the elite, and people who were still loyal to the dictatorship, people who had flourished under dictatorship, did everything they could to oust him. And he was ousted twice in 1994 and then again in 2004.
Well, let's let Robert join us and talk a little bit about the coup d'etat.
Mm-hmm. Well, the first coup d'etat took place in 91.
Right.
And that was on September 30th of 91. So he had been in office just a number of months. And that was under the Bush 1.
Right.
Who Haitians call Papa Bush. And that led to a period of total terror in Haiti.
Yeah, there was some 5,000 or 10,000 people.
About 5,000 people, which is a conservative estimate killed, and the development of these death squads called FRAP, which just ransacked the country, and were aimed at. It was like El Salvador.
Right, and FRAP is the acronym for the Front for the Revolutionary Advancement
Of
the popular, which is
Popular Haiti,
exactly.
yeah.
such a euphemism, such
Right.
an erroneous euphemism
It was
for it.
it was a group of terrorists,
Death Squad.
the Death Squad under the control of the military, which
Right.
was in power,
Right.
armed by the United States. And
Right.
you know, after a period of time, there was such an uproar both within Haiti and internationally.
Right, and right here, there
And
was a
here.
huge campaign.
And here,
And
right?
your father, he
Yeah.
helped lead it.
And also within the black community here.
Right.
That, you know, that at a certain point the US had to agree to bring Aristide back. Aristide had to come back.
Right.
And that was under Clinton. Except Clinton did not want Aristide to resume his policies of popular democracy or real economic change in Haiti. And to ensure that, the U.S. said, you cannot serve your full term. Because Aristide balked at a lot of the changes that the U.S. wanted.
Right.
He would not privatize like they wanted.
Right.
He would not just remove all the taxes on the rich. And so what they wanted was a compliant Aristide. And what they got was Aristide. And so
The
they
champion of the poor.
And so they said, okay, your term ends in 95, just like it would have if you had served your full term in Haiti. Except he had served most of it in exile.
Right.
And so everyone in Haiti we want the full 5 years.
Right. Yeah.
Except
I
the
remember
U.S.
the
went.
campaign with
The U.S. went, no, we do not want him. And then in 2000, he ran again. Preval served.
Rene Preval.
Rene Preval was the next president,
right.
and the U.S. allowed him
Right.
to serve his full term, and
He was
there was
more
he was
compliant.
much more compliant.
Yes.
He was much more compliant, and remarkably, he served his full term. No coup, no destabilization in that same way,
Right.
and then Aristide came back. You know, I was in Haiti in 2000 when he was running for office, and the foundation had been started. There were all of these wonderful programs, like literacy programs, women's cooperatives, microcredit programs, all of like you could see what they wanted to do when they came back into power.
In fact, he developed the Department of Women or something.
Yes,
Ministry.
the Ministry of Women.
Right.
And there were, and this time they not only controlled the presidency, but they controlled Parliament. They controlled the election, as you said, was overwhelming.
I know.
Overwhelming. So this was the chance.
And he didn't even campaign.
Yeah, this was the
to.
chance for a true popular government. And from the beginning, it was destabilized by the U.S. From the very beginning. If you look at what's happening in Venezuela now, or if it was like from the very beginning,
Right.
there were loans were cut off, loans for treatment for AIDS, loans for water purification, loans for, everything that was coming to that government
After they were
cut
approved.
off after they were approved.
I know, and I remember, I couldn't believe it. I had to ask, I think I was interviewing Pierre Labossiere, and, when they said that the loans were already approved, and they couldn't get them.
Yeah.
That's right. They couldn't get them.
And the U.S. was blocking it.
Yep.
They just blocked it.
They blocked every single one. And this was
and that just blew my mind. I'm
Yeah.
like, how do they do that?
And this was
Right.
under the Bush administration,
Bush
baby
too.
Bush. All right? This
Right.
was Bush too. But the Democrats also refused to back at that point, right? I remember we met with Pelosi's office,
Right.
and Pelosi was already, we have problems with Aristide. We would support humanitarian aid to Haiti, but we do not, we're not going to go too far to support this government. And all of that led to the 2004 coup and the kidnapping of Aristide.
But we should also talk about the fact that the 2004 was celebrating the bicentennial.
Absolutely.
And African leaders, people were coming from all over the world, from
Yeah.
Africa and everything to celebrate that bicentennial.
That's right, because it was so historic. I mean, this is the bicentennial
Yep.
of the Haitian Revolution that Ayana
Right.
just described, and its
Exactly.
historic significance for African people all around the
all
world.
over the
Right.
world. The 1st Black Republic
right.
was
Absolutely.
established. So the coup d'etat was timed perfectly as far as the enemy
Yep.
is concerned.
That's
you know?
right. And
Totally destabilized that whole thing. you know.
Yes,
And that was a heartbreaking time.
it really was.
Because, again, like you said, there were so many preparations and just so much joy associated with that moment.
Right.
And the whole thing was totally sabotaged.
I know.
And
but
your
let's
father
talk
was
about,
there.
Yeah.
Let's
He
talk
was
a
there.
little bit about the accomplishments within that 4-year period.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand that he built more schools than had ever been built in Haiti in that period.
Absolutely.
That's true.
And that, public education was something that wasn't available in Haiti, and now it's also not available. But it was something that was a huge mission of theirs. And actually, we can see that, the Aristide family is still very much invested in education, and we'll talk about that later. But that was one of the things, that their goal was to really increase literacy amongst the population, to validate Haitian Creole as an official language, because the majority of the population speaks Creole, but it's always been invalidated, and French has always been the official language of Haiti, despite the fact that a tiny minority speaks it fluently. The elite. And so that was one of the things that was very important at the time. Also, as we mentioned, the women's ministry and getting women involved in politics. One of the things that we should mention as well, a really important thing that the Lavalas government did was to hold...
Back up a little bit and explain Lavalas.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So Lavalas is a term that means flood, and it's talking about the various, these various political streams coming together in a mighty flood, or a movement
Right.
of people all fighting for the same things or similar goals in
It's
Haiti.
a great term,
It
right,
is.
for a movement.
So it's like,
right?
you have your individual organizations and community groups and whatever you have, but then together we are a flood, and we're massive and we're strong.
Right.
And
Like a cleansing flood.
a cleansing, I love that. A cleansing flood.
flash flood
There you go.
of the
Flash
people.
flood. Yes.
And you can see in the streets, it's literally a flash flood. I mean, it's crazy. If and if people have never seen a flood, a Lavalas protest,
Oh
when
my
the movement
goodness.
comes out, I encourage you
Huge.
to look on YouTube.
Right.
I mean, there's so many of them.
Right.
Right.
I forgot where I was going.
Well, you're
RSD
talking
was
about
an
the
incredible
achievements,
organizer.
right?
That's right.
And so, like, one of the
Yes,
one
thank
of the
you.
achievements was
Lost
they
my track.
doubled the minimum wage.
That's right.
Wow.
That's
right.
right.
They started. And this is why they. This
And
is
they
why
had
they
a
got.
fit about that.
Oh yeah, they
Yeah.
had
There
fit about
wasn't
all
much.
of this. They started naming on the radio the businessmen who had not paid their taxes.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Okay, they set up health clinics
That's right.
in the poorest communities and including in rural areas. Their goal was to set up a health clinic in all the rural areas of Haiti.
Right.
Okay, they built parks. They built parks in the poorest communities, in like what they called, like, what people here would call like the absolutely inner city areas.
Right.
And I remember talking to someone who said, "You don't understand what that means." Like, in other words, the most despised people in Haiti, the people who had been written out of Haiti's history.
Right.
Like, why would you build a park for people in Cité Soleil?
Right.
Why would you build like a park with a lit area where people could read at night?
Right.
Why would you do
So
that?
adults could learn.
Like,
to
why
read.
would you do that? And you
Yes.
do that because you respect those people.
Right.
And
and
they
be-
did actually have reading
And they did.
lessons
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
in the
Oh, yeah.
parks
And
that were well
adult
lit.
literacy programs.
Right. Yeah.
More spending on agriculture than had ever been
Yeah.
Right.
done.
Yeah.
More spending on, cooperative, spending for cooperative farms,
Right.
including loans to like women who were doing agriculture. So these are all very concrete gains, and there's a reason why, like 10 years, 11 years after the coup, why Lavalas is still the most popular political party in Haiti. People don't forget.
And that's the other thing too. Also, because we talked about the Haitian military and how it had been a force for terrorizing the population. One of the people's demands was that the military be disbanded.
And that's
because
what he did.
It was taking up 40% of the national budget. He disbanded it, reallocated that money to other places, and also called to task the people who were responsible for various massacres. So he was one of the first presidents to really put on trial and aggressively seek those members of the military who had been a part of massacres in the country.
I'm sorry, but I can't help but think that Obama should be putting on trial Bush and Cheney.
Yes.
For war crimes, for crimes against humanity.
That's right, yeah.
And Aristide did that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Something similar.
And reparations.
Right. And he
restitution.
Well,
restitution.
That's right. Well, restitution. You're right, because it wasn't even about reparations. It was about because
restitution
France
of the $21 billion. Yes.
And so they filed a formal demand to get it back from France.
That was a bold move,
right?
To get it back from France, and France was a key participant in the coup.
Exactly.
Against Aristide.
Yeah, and if they could have gotten restitution, they would no longer be able to call Haiti the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere.
That's right.
Which they seem to love to do.
With the first payment that Haiti had to make for the restitution that Ayana talked about, when they had to make their first payment to France, they had to shut their public school system down in order to pay that first payment in the 1800s. So it had a complete impact.
Diabolical.
It was.
Really.
And so Aristide said, we're gonna go to the international courts and get that money back. And France said, hell no. Hell no. We're gonna bring you down along with the United States and Canada.
I want to jump ahead to the election of or selection of the current president, Michel Martelly, who was formerly not only a Duvalier supporter of Papa Doc and Baby Doc, but also was a nightclub owner and just a
singer,
a really unseemly character, to say the least. And what's been going on since his election, and talk about how Hillary Clinton flew to Haiti when there was a runoff to make sure that their man got in, Martelly.
Right.
Talk about that a little bit.
Would you like to start?
Okay. In 2011, when Martelly became president in 2011, and there had been a runoff before his selection.
Right. There were three candidates.
And he had placed third in the runoff.
Right.
And his history is exactly like you said. He was a Duvalierist from his early days. And when
Proudly.
And when the 1991 coup happened, he ran a nightclub called The Garage, where all of these frat people, that terrorist group, that little death squad group, just hung out, right? And he was the nightclub owner who just, fed them their drinks and hung out with them. And he was totally anti-Aristide and vile about it throughout the entire time that Aristide was coming to power, and very open about it. And so Martelly ran, and he was third. And then the OAS sent a delegation to Port-au-Prince, including Hillary Clinton, who in the midst of the Egypt crisis, during the Arab Spring and all of that, she came to Port-au-Prince to personally lobby with the Electoral Council in Haiti that Martelly should not be third, he should be second, so that he could be in the runoff. And miraculously, he was placed second. And so it was with a personal intervention by Hillary Clinton. So he was placed second, and then even more miraculously, he won the selection, which is a selection because about 20% of the people voted. Lavalas was not allowed to participate in the election, the most popular political party.
Yeah, and that would be like running an election in the United States and excluding the Democratic Party.
Yeah, exactly.
And even worse.
Right.
Or worse, because You'd have to exclude both. The
You'd have to
Democratic
exclude-
and the Republican Party.
You'd have to exclude both. So in the end, he became, like, we don't even call it an election. It was a demonstration election. Right. He's their guy.
Right.
And even recently, when I'm sure we'll get to it about all the corruption and the repression under Martelly, even recently, like a few months ago, Bill Clinton said, this is the best government Haiti's ever had. Oh. I loved working with President Martelly while he draped his arm around him.
That clip right now, do you think?
Sure.
It would be a good time. Mm-hmm.
So he's been their guy from the beginning, and he still remains it.
Right.
And I'll just say, too, the other thing, that election was right after the earthquake, where 300,000 people instantly died. And that the election process, quote unquote, was steeped in so much fraud and people who had died in the earthquake were supposedly voting in this election.
Yeah, it was a 7-point something on the Richter scale, and it was totally devastating.
That's right. Yeah. And so it was fraught with foolishness. People were being intimidated at the polls. Polls that supposedly were supposed to be open were closed. Lavalas was totally excluded, as you mentioned. The whole thing was just complete sham.
Can we go to the clip now? There we go.
Haitian activists staged a protest outside Hillary Clinton's Manhattan office. The demonstrators claim billions of dollars were stolen through the Haiti Reconstruction Commission headed by Bill Clinton. They also say Haiti was used as a cover for foreign governments to funnel kickbacks of possibly hundreds of millions of dollars through the Clinton Foundation. They say it was done in exchange for favors that Hillary was doing for them as Secretary of State. They say they want their message to get out so Americans won't vote for her if she runs for president.
We are telling the world of the crimes that Bill and Hillary Clinton are responsible for in Haiti, and we are telling the American people that the over 32,000 emails that Hillary Clinton said she deleted have evidence of the crimes they've committed.
The demonstrators staged a rally in front of Bill Clinton's office in Harlem in January. With a recess.
Do you want to make a comment on the gentleman who was just speaking?
This film documents the 7-year effort of an...
Yeah, I think that, the protests that have been going on are really important and powerful because they're really bringing to light... The Clintons have a long history of intervening in Haiti and being at the forefront of it, and they're consistently involved in it. From the time of their honeymoon, where they supposedly fell in love with Haiti in the 1970s under dictatorship, under Baby Doc Duvalier's regime.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, this is the time that they are like, because a lot of people are like, why are they so invested in Haiti? Well, they fell in love with it at the time of their honeymoon under dictatorship. So this was the time where
shined it on.
Oh yeah, well this was the time where tourism was flourishing and people were tourists were coming in and out of Haiti and and it had a glossy veneer on it, but there was a lot of terrible stuff going on underneath the surface. Repression, economic exploitation. Corporations coming. Baby Doc Duvalier letting in a number of corporations. And
and what about the Tonton Macoute?
Tonton Macoute, exactly.
Which translates boogeyman.
Exactly. So that's the Haitian military are being used as the private...
The death squads. Really.
Exactly, being used as death squads.
Right.
So that's where it all started. And then, throughout the 90s, throughout Clinton's presidential term, as we mentioned, we talked about the conditions that they tried to impose and force Aristide to agree to in order to let him come back. And then also, we whenever we talk about the Clintons, we have to talk about their, Bill Clinton's involvement in Haiti's massive poverty today and destroying Haiti's agriculture. And, especially when it comes to the rice industry. Haiti, even under dictatorship, Haiti was producing a lot of things for itself. This whole idea of importing, Haiti today, poor though it is one of the largest importers of U.S. rice today. I forgot which one. I know it's in the top 5. How is it that the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere is one of the largest importers of U.S. rice? Well, what happened is that in the 90s, Bill Clinton subsidized American rice farmers.
Right.
and made it possible for them to produce their rice at a really low cost and then sell it at a really low cost. And then what they did is they undercut the agricultural industry in Haiti, making it such that, the Haitian farmer couldn't compete price-wise. So if you were a poor Haitian living, in poverty, and you go into the store and you see Haitian bag of rice, which costs more, versus a U.S. bag of rice, you go for the U.S. bag of rice. And then that totally destroyed the Haitian rice economy, or the Haitian rice industry.
They've done that all over the world.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
They really have.
They've done it in Vietnam. They've done it in the Philippines. They've done it in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And so now this is what's going on is that they're being called to task for their flagrant abuses and their flagrant violations with their
also,
involvement
and
in
since
Haiti.
the earthquake, Bill Clinton has kind of become the self-appointed czar of Haiti.
That's
He's
right.
been meeting with international capitalists, investors, and deciding who's going to invest in Haiti. And talk about the industrial park.
Well, first of all, he has been the official UN representative in Haiti, so he has like an official position, and he has been in charge of millions and millions of dollars of reconstruction aid. Like supposedly $10 billion
Yes.
was pledged to Haiti, and
Right.
Clinton has been a funnel through both the UN and through his foundation, the Clinton Global Initiative and the Clinton Bush Fund, to channel aid to Haiti. And his approach, which is very similar to what he's done here in the States, has been this very classic neoliberal approach, which is to fund the elite and hope that it funnels down. Like supposedly it will funnel down
Trickle
to the
down,
people.
as they call it. Yeah, we're still waiting for the trickle.
Exactly.
Right.
And so what is that? Luxury hotels. Like for example, the Clinton Global Initiative just spent $45 million for the Marriott Hotel.
Yes, I read about
to be
this.
built
Unbelievable.
in Haiti, right? Well,
Right.
she's like, I don't even know. I don't know these hotels, but whether 4-star or 5-star is the best.
Okay, let's juxtapose that to
5-star.
5-star,
the
okay.
epidemic of cholera.
Right.
Exactly.
And 9,000,
9,000
at least
deaths.
9,000 deaths and 21,000 infected.
Yeah, even
and-
more. It's
even
more than that.
More than that.
And brought by the UN.
Right.
Yeah, the Nepalese
Right,
were
brought
just
by Nepalese
dumping
troops.
their raw sewage
That's right.
into a river that Haitians drank from.
That's right.
Right.
And
Unbelievable.
And juxtapose that to the hundreds of thousands of people who are still without decent shelter following the earthquake.
Exactly.
Right? And for whom homes have never been built. And so you have, at least we were trying to figure out whether it's 4 or 5 luxury hotels that have now been funded, both by the Clinton Global Initiative, by USAID, and by the Red Cross.
I know.
Which
They're
bought
disgusting.
land to
Right.
build another luxury hotel for its own staff so that they can have a good place to do their work in Haiti. So that's one thing. And then the other thing, as you said, is this Caracol Industrial Park, which is, a garment factory which will supposedly have thousands of low-wage jobs.
Of course.
Low-wage jobs in the northern part of Haiti that will be textile jobs that will manufacture T-shirts and other garments for Walmart,
Oh, boy.
The Gap, Target,
Right.
etc., at wages that are going to be under the base minimum wage in Haiti.
Which
And-
is, what is that about?
well, at this
$3
point,
a day or
yeah,
something?
about $3 a day. Okay, so
A day, not an hour.
a day.
Right.
All right, and so there's been huge protests internationally about this,
Right.
right? And this is at a point where, for example, there was just a 2-day strike, a general strike in Haiti, which was about the cost of living in Haiti, which is like terrible right now. The cost of living, while all of these plans are happening, has gone way up. Gas in Haiti costs $5 a gallon.
Ooh, it's worse.
It's worse than here.
Yeah.
It's worse than here.
And they're poorer.
And they're
Yeah.
poorer. And so transportation workers led this strike for 2 days, and it was repressed violently by the Martelly government. So when you hear these wages that are low and these kind of sweatshop plans, don't think that the cost of living is low.
Mm-hmm.
The cost of living is high in Haiti. And so there's growing discontent on the economic level. People can't make it.
Right.
People can't make it there.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about the UN occupation. Since the earthquake, the United Nations has sent, backed up by the U.S., of course, sent troops to Haiti, and they've become an occupying force. And we brought a clip along. Sure, you want to let's share that with our viewers. Okay. The people are not going to believe that the UN forces are actually behaving like Ferguson police.
Absolutely.
Only worse.
Yeah.
Literally shooting at people, shooting into people's homes, killing people in their beds. Just incredible stuff.
Attention! Shipping class in the Hey!
So much for peacekeepers. Robert, do you want to comment on the UN use of force against Haitians?
Well, I'll start, and then Ayana, I know, is going to also comment. I just think that just because you put on a blue helmet doesn't make you a peacekeeper. These are military forces that have been sent there to occupy Haiti and to do the job of repressing the people and to act as supplemental forces for the Haitian government and the police. And in this case, there's been huge demonstrations against the Martelly government, and those demonstrations have been attacked by Haitian police. And what you just saw the UN do has been done routinely by Haitian police in other demonstrations. We don't know how many people have been killed. We have reports that in almost all of these demonstrations, people have been killed. They've been tear gassed, they've been beaten, and the police have used chemical agents that have really affected people and left them, unable to breathe and with terrible skin conditions. So this is rare footage of the UN doing the same.
Right.
And we think they've been doing it a lot.
Yeah.
And so these are Jordanian troops that have been at the heart of a number of massacres in Cité Soleil over the years. And, finally we have some footage to show people that this is not a benign occupation with UN forces handing out candy and opening up soccer fields and distributing anti-malarial medication. This is a military occupation
Exactly.
of Haiti.
Exactly.
That's what it is, and there are thousands of UN troops, and they're doing the bidding of a right-wing repressive government, and that's what's going on in Haiti, and it's been going on since the coup. They were there to enforce the coup, and they're still there to enforce the coup.
Right, and I want to end on a more positive note and talk about the fact that first the Duvaliers were allowed to return. Baby Doc Duvalier and his family were allowed to return. Yeah. And then, fortunately, he passed away. Anyway, because the world can do without Baby Doc Duvalier. But Aristide was finally allowed to return from his exile in South Africa, where he had, how many years was he in South Africa? 7, I thought so. And so he and his lovely wife and his 2 children, Mildred Aristide and he has a son and a daughter, returned.
2 daughters.
Oh, 2 daughters, right.
2 daughters.
Yeah. And so, of course, immediately, they hit the ground running. But, of course, when they returned, Mildred described it in an interview. In fact, I have the interview on my blog if you want to check it out, kilunyasha.blogspot.com. There's an interview with Mildred Aristide. And she called it the reception that they received, a tsunami of love, because it was just amazing. The Haitian people turned out en masse. It took them 15 or 20 minutes to get out of the car.
Yeah.
There were people just everywhere. And it was just an amazing return. So they set up the Aristide Foundation. They reinstated it, actually. And they built a nursing school, with the help of the Cubans, and talk about that.
Well, so one of the things that, they, excuse me, one of the things that we were talking about, the emphasis on education, this has been something that has been extremely important and is extremely important for the movement, as far as teaching these skills, but also teaching them from the lens of building the country together. So instead of learning these skills in a private school somewhere, in a rich segment of the city or Port-au-Prince or something, and then going off to Europe or to the United States or where have you to continue your education, that you're staying in Haiti and that you're using your skills to help build the country up and help support your people. And so UNIFA, which is I forgot what the acronym stands for, but the school that started out with the medical school that was built was actually, when we're talking about
the Aristide Foundation University.
Yeah,
exactly. Thank you, Aristide Foundation University. It was, at the time that it was built in 2004, they came and they wrecked that during the coup. They wrecked that. The school had to close down. And many of the students had to go to Cuba and had to go elsewhere in order to further their education.
And they turned it into a military base.
And they turned it into a military. So the same UN troops that you're seeing, like this supposedly benevolent force, right? They turned a medical school into military barracks. That right there, that imagery gives you everything you need to know. And then, what was fortunate to happen is when Aristide was able to come back, because people had fought for it for so long. One of the things that his family decided to do was their mission was to really make sure that school was able to open up again and flourish, and that they were able to take both women and men and train them, in medicine, and also they opened a law school as well, and a nursing school.
And they go for parity, 50% women, 50% men.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I love it.
And no matter what your income level and the goal, and they're very transparent about that. One of the
Right.
goals is to be able to serve within your community.
Yes.
Yeah,
Did you want to
and
say
they have about 1,200 students now.
Yes.
And when they were shut down in 2004, they had 247 students.
Mm-hmm.
So in the middle of this, since they've been back, there's been at least like 4 attempts to arrest President Aristide.
I was about to say,
right?
It's obvious why he's come under attack.
And they've been like, their house has been surrounded at different times by like heavily armed police. There've been like threats in the media. There've been like government, like spokespeople have said you're about to get arrested.
Mm-hmm.
There've been warrants issued on like completely bogus charges. So there's been every attempt to intimidate and threaten the Aristides and Lavalas and this project. And in the middle of it, it keeps going.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I remember one of the times where they surrounded their house with police, and they even had a tank out there.
Mm-hmm.
And people came from everywhere around Port-au-Prince to surround.
They
to,
masked.
Like they just masked, and they said, "We will stand here until these police leave, and we'll stand here forever. And if they arrest us, they arrest us. If they kill us, we'll stand here." And
The Haitian people are so inspiring.
Yeah.
They are just, their courage, the bravery is amazing.
I know, and it's like, and they beat it back. I mean, they beat it back. And then the next day, UNIFA had had like entrance exams, and 1,300 people showed up to register and try to get into the university. So it's, it's kind of an unstoppable force, and it's about education, and it's about inclusion, and it's this notion that, not just the elite is going to be a doctor in Haiti, and not just the elite is going to send their kid to a nursing school or a law school. And they also have opened the first physical therapy school.
I know, I've loved that, because, that's what I need and can't get.
I know, and one of the reasons was because it didn't exist, and there was such a need for it after the earthquake.
Of course.
Because there were so many people who were disabled after the earthquake.
Exactly.
And there was nothing.
Yeah, try to get some PT here.
Exactly.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, it's part of the vision, right? Just on a small scale. But it shows you, like, the vision of Lavalas is alive there.
Right,
I
absolutely.
know. It's
And in the
very
face of all
exciting.
of the racism,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
we're almost clean out of time.
Oh, okay.
Well, could we make our announcement?
Make an announcement
Yeah.
very quickly, because
All right,
we're
okay,
almost done.
This is our newsletter, www.haitisolidarity.net.
All right.
And it includes the interview that you referenced with Mildred Aristide.
Oh, good.
And then there's a program.
We're out. We blew it.
We can keep.
Oh, we can?
And then there's a
Okay.
program that's coming up on April 26th at St. Paul's AME Church, and it's with Danny Glover and Selma James.
Ooh.
And Selma James just wrote or edited a new book, and it's about Julius Nyerere and Ujamaa, the hidden story of Tanzania's socialist villages. And Pierre is also going to be there.
And I have to go.
All right.
Thank you so
And it's
much,
April 26th.
Ayana, Labossiere, and Robert Roth. And
Thank you, Kilu.
Thank you, Keely.
and thank Sydney Madison, and thank you, viewers, for tuning in to Freedom is a Constant Struggle. All power to the people.